Hey guys, Ghazzy TV here with another Path of Exile build guide video. In this one, I'm going to talk about cock build, and I'm not talking about the small PP, hey, I need to compensate because of my tiny PP type of cast and crit builds. No. We're talking about the big, the girthy, real true cock of the 7 Cs array class, and that is the Chains of Command. So what we're going to do is we're going to show you the Chains of Command build, which is completely oriented around having you can only have animated minions. This includes the Dancing Dervish or Dancing Duo. It also includes Animate Weapon and Animate Guardian. And that's essentially it. We can't even use skitter bots. So what this does is that it animates the Animate Guardian's weapon, which means that that weapon that he'll be wielding is going to be the bread and butter for this type of build. So there's a handful of different mechanics we'll be abusing, and the gameplay footage you'll be seeing is some endgame bosses and whatnot that we've been playing, with different types of budget on the build. And I'm going to just go through the mechanics of this build initially because it's very hard to understand. So I'm going to try to make sure to describe this as easily as I can. Quick break for this video sponsor, which is a game you all know about. It's Raid Shadow Legends. They're ramping up their content consistently and wanted to share that with our community. Now, with over 600 heroes and a limited edition hero available through our unique code linked in the descriptions below, they're now releasing some pretty cool new endgame in the form of a Hydra boss. This new Hydra boss has 6 heads, all counting as an individual boss fight on its own with its own abilities and you need to overcome. Now take the Head of Suffering as an example, which introduces a new skill called Pain Link, allowing it to share damage it takes back to you. Another example would be the Head of Decay, that continuously weakens your team as well as acts as support for the remaining heads on the battlefield. Now, I've played this game a few times and I've always had a good time on stream playing with the community, and they're always consistently providing new things to do in the game, which keeps it really fresh. If you want to try out the game, you can get a bunch of free stuffs on top of a limited time hero introducing the esports legend and Navi superstar Simple, who is available for free as a hero in the game on top of some other goodies by using the link linked in the descriptions below. If you use my link in the descriptions or scan my QR code, you'll get a free starter pack worth almost $30 to kickstart your game. We're talking a free champion, Rector Drath, 200k silver, 1 energy refill, 1 XP boost, and 1 ancient charge, so you can summon awesome champions as soon as you get into the game. So if you're finding yourself bored without any games to play as you wait for the 3.17 PoE League, jump on the wagon and play Raid Shadow Legends. So some fundamental pieces such as Gravebind gloves is crucial to equip on the actual Animate Guardian, and this allows him to have any kills that are nearby him that is happening will actually count as his kill, which will trigger the Chains of Command's level 20 Animate Guardian's weapon rather than the level 18. The level 18 version of the Chains of Command is 10% chance to trigger the Animate Guardian's weapons when an animate weapon kills an enemy. But by having Gravebind gloves, as you can see here, is then allowing the Animate Guardian to guarantee the kills to be his. Now, the problem with the Animate Guardian is that it can be very hard to understand how it works. So in the descriptions below is a link to an in-depth mechanical video describing how the Animate Guardian works, some suggested gear sets for him and whatnot, which is not designed for Chains of Command, but the in-depth mechanical approach to how he works as a gem and a skill is very important to understand. So do check that video out and then come back to this one. So the way we do it is by having Gravebind, we're guaranteeing kills for the Animate Guardian. A couple of fundamental things, such as the fact that there's it doesn't matter how many kills is happening. Each initial blow or attack or skill or spell that is dealing a or several killing blows will only count as 1 summon for the Animate Guardian. So an example of this is when we're using the Writhing Jar Flask, which is how we're going to sustain ourselves with weapons versus single target. They summon a couple of worms. 2 writhing worms escape and the flask is used. If the worms end up on each different side, the Guardian will then kill one and then run to the other and kill the other, generating 2 weapons. If both of them land in the same location and he kills them in 1 blow, you'll only get 1 minion. So as you can see here, we have both in the similar location. We only got 1 weapon out of this. Now we have 1, and I'll summon another flask. And now you see here they got spread out and there were 2 different killing blows, and now I've received 3 weapons. So that was 2 weapons from those and only 1 from the initial one. So do it again. Those were spread, and therefore I got 2 indifferent killing blows, generating 2 minions. Same thing here, we're up on 7. So now we're gonna get 8 or 9. That looks like a 9. Yes, it is, because they got spread out enough. Same thing here. Now we're up on 11, and now we're 13, and now we're not gonna get higher than 14. So the problem here is that the radius on Gravevine is not very long at all. They're not very big. So in some cases, you're going to be having killing blows happening by your actual weapons. When this happens, you only have level 18 Animate Guardian's weapon, which has a maximum count of 13 weapons, whilst the level 20 version has a maximum count of 14. This is one of the only hard limitations in DPS that you can get out of the Animate Guardian Change of Command build. So the version I'm playing on right now that you're watching is actually, you can see it clearly with the Ball of Faith. This is a somewhat high budget build. It is using one of the higher end weapons for the Enemy Guardian, which is just a rare axe with a 900 plus PDPS. Preferably you want to go for 1000 or 1.1k PDPS axe if you want to go real crazy. We go Chaos Conversion because we're an occultist. We have a, this is actually pretty okay cold attuned buckler for the Brittle, which is yet another mechanic that we're abusing. And elevated nearby enemies chaos resistance with a proper spirit offering enchant, and obviously the best weapon you can get with this build. Other than that, the build is very straightforward in terms of gearing. So I'm going to show you the POB for the low budget build, and as you can see in the gameplay footage, the build is completely destroying clearing. It's very smooth, it's effective to play, and it actually handles endgame bosses very, very smoothly. You don't need to get a rare 900 plus PDPS axe for the sake of endgame content. You can actually use it at Serious Disfavor, which will grant you way more DPS than you'll ever need. And before you get access to the a Serious Disfavor, you can actually use a White Wind and be on cold conversion. And the way you can progress this build in terms of gearing is very, very effective. I'll go through all of this as I go through the POB in a bit. So other than that, I think that the biggest problem that you have is sustaining your flask, which is why we've made some specific adjustments to the tree, which I'll also talk about in a bit. But the gearing in general is very smooth, very simple. It's just the abusive mechanics that we're going for from Change of Command, and the shield weapon is very streamlined, and then it's a 4 white Triad, which I'll describe how to get and what you can use prior to getting one as well. Anyways, let's dive into the build guide. I think we are going to show you the low budget POB first for the cold, and I'll explain the strategy first. First off, in the low budget, this portion here will most likely not be in the build guide. That will be linked in the descriptions below when it's finished, because of the fact that Glorious Vanities is somewhat expensive, and it also requires you to get chaos resistance as we're using Divine Flesh. This is, however, a very smooth upgradable option if you're going into a higher budget or want to invest into the build. But I'll probably take this away when I make the build guide footage, because it is a bit expensive and I don't want to make the build guide expensive. However, this is the natural pathing to upgrade your defense, in my opinion. As you start playing this build, you want to rush out from this path here. You want to get up the life node, you want to pick up Lord of the Dead as well as Enduring Bond, which will allow you to run with Absolution and level with that and Herald of Purity together with Vitality and Zombies. Very, very smooth. Skip the Essence Distraction. This is only something we'll need with the mastery of gaining flash charges. This is something we use with the Writing Jar later to flash sustain. Also skip Necromantic Aegis and the Decay Ward. This is only for the Brittle abuse that we're going to do later. Besides that, we just want to pick up the quick recovery. Get the plus 50 life here first. I think I have mine here, but you get the 50 flat first. Skip the jewel early. And then you can go in for Sacrifice and Spiritual Command. This will help you leveling very, very smoothly. And then you just want to go straight down and then pick up Grave Pact. Or you can choose to cross over here with these 2 points that you'll respec later to pick up the Purity of Flesh, get some Serenity, and get the Righteous Army and Redemption. It's a matter of personal preference. Whichever you choose doesn't matter. And then you can go down for Determination, get the Constitution, Tireless, and move up for Devotion or down depending on which route you decided to take. And that's about it. It's very, very generic. Once you get a Victorious Charity Shield, as you can see in this build here, we're using a minimum 2 Frenzy Power Brittle Shield, which is the end game goal, which is not that expensive. But you can very easily use a Victorious Charity for this build, and it actually performs very, very well. by having Necromantic Aegis. You don't need a Decay Ward, but you kind of want to have the Mastery to keep the minions alive in a pretty effective way. So I would actually still take these, even if I didn't have the Brittle Shield, because of the fact that you want to keep your weapons alive. That is the biggest problem with playing Chains of Command build, is that the actual weapons are dying consistently, and this prevents that from happening in almost all situations. When it comes to gearing, however, the jewels that you can see here is a survival secret. This is one of the pieces that we're using to actually sustain our flask charges. This reduces less flask effect duration, but we gain 2 charges every 3 seconds while the flasks are inactive. Writhing Jar flasks, which are the main purpose of this jewel, they are instant roll flasks pretty much. So we're in a situation where they are never active, which means that they're always getting this charge. They also have increased charges gained from the Essence Distraction together with a Mastery that gives another life and mana, and since the Writhing Jar flasks are hybrid, you'll get even more charges from doing that. Ascendancy nodes wise, we should probably mention that real quick, is that we're running Malediction, Profane Bloom, Void Beacon, and Withering Presence. This is to get ourselves some withering effect. We have the enemy being with the Malediction from the Malediction node. We have extra Chaos Resistance. We get Void Beacon, which lowers enemies' Chaos and Cold Resistance, which is why we're running Cold on the lower budget version. And then Profane Bloom for those sweet-ass explosions. The oiled modifier or node is the replenishing remedies, again to generate a ton of life and mana flask charges, which all affects the Writhing Jar. You can actually completely sustain yourself without being a Pathfinder, without being a Scion, by just having the survival secrets, Essence Distraction, and replenishing remedies. These are enough to more than enough sustain your flask versus single target to have full out minion army from this build, which is really, really smooth. Other than that, the jewels we're using is just generic flat life with minion damage when you use a skill recently, and preferably cold or physical damage. It would be generally better to have physical damage when you start using a Triad grip though. And then it's just the same across the board. The cluster jewel is very simple. You want to have a Vicious Bite with renewal and life. This is the expensive version of it. The lower budget version, as you can see, we have plenty of extra points spent, for example, on some life nodes over here, one more life node over here. And there's the extra nodes that I've spent into the actual Glorious Vanity. So by taking these points away, you can see the bill is 86, which is the purpose of this approach. The reason for that is because you don't necessarily need to have Vicious Bites till you go for higher budgets. This allows you to go from any minion damage cluster jewel that has 8, 10, 12 passives, whichever floats your boat, whichever is the cheapest. Just get yourself a renewal, maybe a Feasting Fiends, maybe you could get yourself a flat life on the cluster jewel. Honestly, whichever is the cheapest. The only reason we're using this is because there's a lack of minion damage on the tree, and we want these small nodes to get actual life and energy, minion damage. Later on in the higher budget, you're gonna want the Vicious Bite because we can generate a situation where we have 100% chance to crit, and it actually goes for the high budget version. The low budget with a Brittle approach actually it's 58% crit. However, just get any minion damage cluster jewel. That's why the build is designed this way, which means that you can buy the cheapest shit ever. And since you don't need Vicious Bite, you can get the ones with very low item level, allowing you to have a ton of different options. And that pretty much covers the tree. Item wise, if we are using on the low budget version, you can use any sort of melee weapon, wand, whatever you want to use, but we're not going to have a ton of intelligence, so don't use the convoking wands. And the reason for this is because we don't benefit from plus level of skills, since our skill is that we're scaling is based off a modifier on the chest piece. Because of this, we instead want to be in a position where we are scaling actual minion damage. Now, the best case scenario would be to find any weapon that has a synthesized base with implicit minion damage. Now, this can be a bit expensive. I don't think they are very expensive. I think I bought my weapon in game for 10 chaos. I think we found the Kuruyak that you see here in this PUB. I believe we found this for 20C, 30C. Either way, don't aim for it on a league start. Just buy any weapon whatsoever. And then you'll use any type of Essence of Fear. The higher tier, obviously, the better. You can get up to 69% minion damage. And then after that, you just want to make sure there's a suffix open so you can put the trigger socket to spells when you use a skill benchcraft on there. And honestly, if there's no suffix open, use an annulment orb, unless it's cheaper to just use another essence on it, which might actually be the case, and you're done. For the high budget version, you would instead use something like this, where you make sure that there are 3 open suffixes, so that you can put in the multi-craft for attack speed and then the trigger, unless you want to do prefix champion change with Reforged Veiled Chaos Orbs to get the chosen version of the attack speed and then benchcraft trigger. But that's more for higher budget approaches. Outside of that, the Cold Attuned Buckler is a heist drop, and oh god, I hate heist. And this is just a Influence Exalted Orb, and alteration roll is to have the minimum frenzy or power, and then getting the other shield base, and then woken them together. Preferably, you want to have a suffix open so you can benchcraft something like double damage. Best case prefix would be increased damage per 1% chance to block, since we will be actually making our minions block quite consistently. The low budget version for this would definitely be a Victorious Charity. And Victorious Charity is usually more like maybe a chaos, maybe 2 on the first few hours of a league. After that, they're like 1 chaos. So Victorious Charity is more than enough to be used for this build, and it just generates no power charge versus single target, which again is why we don't need Vicious Bite, but it will generate frenzy charges, and therefore actually be considered a better choice. And this is combined together with Necromantic Aegis, obviously. The helmet, if you can get a bone helmet, great. Normally these are pretty expensive due to the overwhelming minion meta that's going on, but you can get any item level 86 or higher helmet just to get the +3 level of socketed minion gems, which is kind of crucial just to make sure that your AG is having a smooth ride. And then we have Chains of Command. Now, Chains of Command don't have to have linked sockets. They can be completely unlinked. All you need to do is have the colors, socket the gems in, and you're done. So not even linking is required for this build. Triad Grip. In the low budget version, you don't need to run Triad. It is a DPS increase that is quite noticeable, and I would strongly recommend getting one, but you don't actually need Triad Grip gloves. And since the Triad Grip would be best off in the lower budget version with 4 green, which you can very easily sort through the jeweler trick, I would recommend getting it, but it will impact the way you socket your gems. So you don't necessarily need this, and that is because of the weapon choice that I'll be talking about in a bit. However, you want to get Triad Grip either way, because the way you get 4 white socket Triad Grip is to double corrupt them through incursion in events from Alva. And I'll talk about that in a bit as well. Boots, generic movement speed, life doesn't really matter. The amulet, if you can get something with a bunch of attributes, that would be solid. This one actually is influence, which is not even needed. Should probably take that away to avoid confusion. There we go. And the modifier is still there. Let's adjust that then. So basically, we're in a situation where you just want attributes, make sure the replenishing remedies is oiled. The rings themselves, as you can see, they're just onset rings with HP. Darkness and Throne, bread and butter of most minion builds. It's just so strong. These jewels are a little bit expensive, so this PUB might be showing a little bit higher DPS than you actually should be having, because these jewels are pretty crazy. But it shows you what you need to get, right? And physical damage will be better than cold for the progression of this character. Writhing Jars, whatever flask you want. Fortress Covenant and Quickening Covenant, those 2 jewels goes in both of these 2 slots. If you can get perfect rolls, great. Attack speed and the minion damage, that's like all you're looking for. And that's about it. Let's see. That's about it for the skills. The gear. The Enemy Guardian gear is a little bit different. The Enemy Guardian, for the higher budget version of him, in terms of defense, would be the helmet should be a Crown of the Tyrant. Now, the reason for this is that this helmet should have a white socket preferably, but it drops all resistances, not all elemental resistance, which means that it lowers enemies' chaos resistance as well. So when we do chaos conversion, this will actually help them with that as well. It will use a doppelganger chest piece. This is to keep him alive. This allows him to remain sane at all times. All of this is in the Enemy Guardian video that I'll link in the descriptions below. This will keep him sane and keep him very, very sturdy and surviving all the time. We talked about Gravebind before, which is the bread and butter of the AG gear. And then last but not least is the weapon choice for the low budget version is a white wind. The reason we are using a White Wind is very simple. There's a lot of attack speed, there's a ton of cold damage, and there's a lot of cold damage if your offhand is empty. Now, enemy regarding a weapon, they can't dual wield, and if they're using a one-handed weapon, their offhand will always be empty. Therefore, the White Wind will be doing a ton of extra damage. They also get that extra layer of defense from the evasion, and they get suppressed spell damage, which is actually pretty nice. But this is just an easy way to get a low-budget weapon till a Series Disfavor becomes more and more accessible on the market. Keep in mind that Disfavor drops from regular Series and is normally piss cheap every league, but White Wind is even more accessible. So basically, just use White Wind till a Series Disfavor becomes available, and then you pick up the Series Disfavor and you use that instead, and it's just so much better. However, with the Series Disfavor, you're gonna want to have a 4 green Triad grip glove, which is why this is in the actual POB. So when it comes to the sockets, it's very straightforward. You want to use multi-strike, increase critical strike damage, predator for single target, which you switch with feeding frenzy for clearing. Then there's going to be minion damage, add a cold penetration, and elemental damage with attacks. And the elemental damage with attacks is something you can switch out if you have a the approach instead of multi-strike, if you feel that that is better. If you can get a Divergent Multi-Strike, that would obviously be the most optimal. Same thing with the Divergent Predator. So it's all a matter of personal preference, which ones you want to go for. But elemental damage with attacks and feeding frenzy should be switched in for clearing, because sometimes it's much smoother to clear without Multi-Strike. Keep in mind that the body armor don't need to be linked with anything. Trigger skill, we are going to be having some problems with our mana. Therefore, the trigger weapon should have a life tap level 1 linked with level 1 Desecrate and level 20 or 21 Flesh Offering in the cold conversion version. In the curses, we're going to be using a Blasphemy Curse. The Blasphemy Curse should be linked together with Frostbite, and you'll have to self-cast the Assassin's Mark yourself. The auras is going to be a Purity of Elements, Determination, Defiance Banner, and then you don't need Enlighten. If you don't need Enlighten, you're gonna run into using a Conqueror's Efficiency, if I can find it. Conqueror's Efficiency right there. By adding a Conqueror's Efficiency, that's going to help you enough with the mana to sustain this by just skipping the Enlighten altogether. And again, this is the low budget version, so we're just stripping it off of everything that is giving it extra damage or costing a lot of currency. So that's the aura setup, and that opens up a socket for you to put anywhere else, because this is normally what we run in the higher budget version, would not be switching to this. The AEG is going to have minion life feeding frenzy elemental army. The reason for elemental army has nothing to do with exposure, but in this version it does actually help. We are using this mainly to increase the actual resistances of our enemy guardian to make sure that he's always overcapped in LE resistances, which goes hand in hand with the defensive choices of our minion mastery nodes. For example, the +1 to 8 maximum elemental resistances. We have an increased effective offering, and we have the 250 accuracy, which is kind of needed early on in the low budget, and a minion leech. Outside of that, we have a mobility, which is shield charge, fast attacks, flame dash, precision. And this is where the entire approach of you getting a 4 green Triad comes into play. By having a 4 green Triad, you would remove shield charge, fast attacks, and you would move the flame dash into, for example, the aura plus flame dash right in this position. This allows you to drop all of this and just have the Triad grip sockets and run it like this. Now, obviously, this is not something you might necessarily need, but it is the best way to do it, in my opinion. You can have a Vol Molten Shell if you have the sockets or the unset ring for it. This will help you sustain physical damage mitigation, because you're not going to be a very tanky build. Keep that in mind, but this will help you a little bit on the way. Convocation can also fit in any spot you have open, which should be an unset ring. And then about the remaining sockets is going to be taken, so it's not much you can do. And that is with the Triad grip being sorted, which will have literally 3 empty sockets you can put some white gems in, such as a portal gem if you want to, and that's about it. And that kind of sums up the gearing for and the skill gems for the low budget version of this build. For the higher budget version, you wanted to go into picking up 4 white Triad, and I'll explain how to get that right now. So when it comes to the 4 white Triad, what you want to do is very simple. You want to do the Betrayal encounter. No, sorry, Alva encounters. Incursion. I keep mixing it up. incursion encounters, which is Alva. With Alva being in the play, what you do is very, very simple. I'm going to show you a quick run on it. First things first, there is a 25% chance that you get 4 white on a double corruption in the Alva corruption temple. The way this works is that there's 25% chance that you get 4 whites, 25% chance that you get 2 implicits, 25% chance that it poofs, and 25% chance that the item turns into an influenced, corrupted, rare item. So we're just gonna run this map till we get to the incursion, and I will show you the little neat trick. It's not very hard to do, but the thing is, it can take some time because you might have to run this a couple of times to get it, and then you might not hit the 4 white on your corruption on a 4-socket triad group. Therefore, there is a cold conversion version that I would recommend starting with. When you talk to Alva, you'll see the temple. Now, in this case, I can verify that I don't see any of the corruption rooms in here. So now I know that none of these rooms have corruption. And then I check out this, and it says the chance to poison garden and chance to kill the garden as the toxins. So that's pack size of poisonous plants. Now, the trick is very simple. If I encounter, because I know there's going to be 3 Alvas in this map, if the first one or the second one has the corruption room in any of these are the ones that I'm choosing to run. If it's on the other ones, you just keep going like normal. But if this first one had the corruption room, say that I could have killed the left one to change this room into the locus of corruption, which is what we're looking for the corrupting. So what then happens is that we're in a position where she is going to allow you to get that room into the locus of corruption. However, in that area, she will not allow you to get the same room for the remaining rooms that you can talk to. So what you do is, if the first one allows you to touch into the locus of corruption room by either upgrading it or switching to it, like one of these 2 here, you will not even want to talk to Alva in the remaining Alva encounters of the entire map. So say I do this now, and this didn't have the locus of corruption, but the second Alva had the locus of corruption or the corruption room, then I would do that one, and then I will never even talk to the third Alva, because if you talk to her, that will hard lock it, and you'll have to do that room the next time you encounter Alva either way. But by not talking to Alva on the 3rd time or the 2nd time, if you've already done a locus of corruption, you will basically allow the same room to roll again the next time you roll a new area. So just to break it down real simple, you get 3 Alva attempts when you're doing the mission in the map. And if you encounter the room you want to upgrade desperately on the 1st or 2nd time you encounter Alva, then if it's not on the 1st, you have to do the 1st, obviously. You have to actually finish it. Then you don't talk to the remaining Alva or Alvas at all. And then you do it again in a new area or a new map. And this is very easy to approach, and you only have a set amount of incursions before the actual incursion is ready to pop. Keep in mind that there are other things that can be very profitable to sell for these maps. For example, the Apex can be somewhat profitable in some leagues, but you have the gem corruption is one thing, and there's a bunch of other loot that you can actually get in these temples that is worth a lot of money. You can get actual currency dropping rooms, and you can get map dropping rooms. So this is a very easy and good, effective way to not just generate currency or getting yourself to 4 white triad, but it's also a very effective way to sustain maps and getting high tier or valued items early in a league. So this is a mechanic I definitely recommend not to discard. But that's basically it. That's how you approach the 4 white triad to get them through double corruption. Until then, you would just simply use the cold conversion of idea of this build. Hope you guys had fun and enjoyed this build guide. It's a little bit long. There's a lot of mechanics to take into consideration. The only thing I really haven't mentioned is the approach of Brittle. And I will explain Brittle real quick because it's a bit of a tricky mechanic to understand. But I will try my best. So the way Brittle works, which is for the higher budget version, and I want to have it explained the best I can, is that the Cold Attuned Buckler applies Brittle on enemies when you block their damage, and you are using the Necromantic Aegis, which is located right here, which makes the shield apply to your minions. So the minions, when they block something, whichever minion or enemy did the attack or spell, they block it, they would apply Brittle to it. Now, Brittle goes up to a maximum stack of 15%. However, the Brittle from the Cold Fume Buckler is hard locked at 5%. Now, 5% crit from Brittle doesn't sound that amazing, but you have to keep in mind that this is baseline crit. These minions, similarly to what most people or most abilities have in this game, is a 5% crit, which essentially means that you're doubling your crit chance. This means that basically any source of crit you have is twice as effective. This is how the high body version of this build has 100% chance to crit with each attack from the enemy Guardian's weapons. This means that things like this support gem is 148% more damage. That's how crazy it is. Now, the reason we're using this is mainly for bossing, obviously. And the cool thing with this is that 99% of all endgame bosses, they either have a swinging strike ability with their default attack, or they have an AoE spell or AoE attack. And because of this, it is very, very, very extremely unlikely that they will not hit a bunch of your minions. And as long as they hit the handful of your minions, you can pretty much guarantee that at least one of them will block, because with this setup, even without Bone Offering, your minions have 65% chance to block attacks and 41% chance to block spells. So as long as 2, 3, maybe 4 minions are getting hit, which in almost all cases they will block and the enemy will be brittled. It's extremely effective, and it's just absolutely lovely to see the amount of damage you can squeeze out of this build. And this is just the low-budget version. High-budget version, I was able to get 15 million, and this was whilst using it Serious Disfavor. I think we pushed it up to 30 something with a proper rare axe as well. All the POBs will be linked in the build guide, and the build guide will be linked in the descriptions below, as well as the in-depth video for the Enemy Guardian. Hope you guys had use of this build guide. It's a bit long, I know that, and I applaud you for enduring the video this long. Make sure you hit the like button and subscribe for more content, and leave a comment below what you think of this build, and I'll see you guys in the next one. So till then, stay safe and keep rocking.